For our third annual Global Colorectal Cancer Congress, leaders from nonprofit organizations from around the world came together virtually. We thank our colleagues for sharing their time and expertise with the colorectal cancer community. These sessions were invaluable, sharing tips on starting a successful nonprofit, things that they wish they knew when starting their nonprofit, and even tips on how to effectively run social media and be a strong advocate. So join us for this collection of insights from our Congress event.
If there's an unmet need that is not currently being filled, then it's time that someone get off their butt, no pun intended, to go and do something about it. And again, that's pretty much the motto that we've followed all the way through. Don't be afraid to lead, because leading will get you somewhere. Following tends not to. The followers will follow you in time to come. But in terms of that, it's also being clear, I think, about what you want to achieve and how you're going to achieve that. And I also look at it, fact is, it's got to be meaningful and impactful as well. There has to be some measurements that we can actually take back to say achievements and goals are being met. Otherwise, we're not doing our job. That's where we look at the unmet need, the bottlenecks within the continuum of care entirely, and picking out those aspects where we can really make the most difference, make the most noise. So again, we don't look at being a big organization. I'm not a believer of being big necessarily, but we can certainly impact change and certainly have a big impact in that respect. But it's thinking strategically and smart and then making it happen.
I would say the first thing is passion, right? The need to move, the need to do something is usually the impetus for all of us, whether it's a family member or whatever the situation is, yourself. And the second thing is the move to action. So identifying that unmet need, as Julian really put forth correctly, and then going after what you can do to affect change. And that will vary from country to country, from organization to organization. And smaller organizations, we all go through, and all of us have gone through this, where you start from a volunteer board and decide to professionalize. That is probably the hardest thing to do. Take people's money and actually pay a person to do something as opposed to putting it into something very specific in research or whatever. And that is the only way to grow an organization and to accomplish more. But this is probably for smaller organizations the biggest challenge, going from a volunteer to a professional organization. Knowing different people, getting out there, meeting different people, whether it's politicians, whether it's other people who are touched by the disease, organizations engaged in this environment. So a lot of networking to do. Don't make the mistake that running a not-for-profit is not a business. It is a business in every sense, like any other business in the world. You have your expenses, you have your revenues, and at the end of the day, if you keep losing money, you're going to be out of business. So, that's the strategy. Creating a strategic plan to grow is the first step. Following the strategic plan is the challenge, to affect what you've planned out to do and to achieve the goal. I would say keep plugging away. Don't get discouraged. Hard work will pay off.
I would say one is I surrounded myself with people that knew way more than me, number one. Number two, I was hyper focused on fundraising. So I'm hyper focused on that. And yes, from a strategic standpoint, really understanding, where can we make a difference? How can we make a difference? How can we make a more and more impact? So we started a small little young professional group that kind of did their own thing. Right. And then I think the real success as we continue to do it is you've got to build that community beyond DC and do it in communities across the country. So you have more people that unfortunately are still affected by colon cancer that are rolling up their sleeves and volunteering and, raising money and doing what we call Blue Hope Bashes or our walks or other things. So I really think it's a simple formula. It starts with that small community and engagement and really cultivation and truly caring about a small group of people, and then building that beyond that. But I feel like if you create that bond, people will give.
I think the hope is in joining bigger networks like ours, in having a dedicated team, like 3 or 4 people, because from our experience, an organization usually that starts with one patient or one family member without a plan that does not succeed. So it's finding 2 or 3 people that are really motivated, understanding the situation very well, what are the issues, and what are the gaps that they can cover, and then coming up with a simple plan for the first couple of years and setting up the goals that could be reached. Because from our experience, it is very unmotivational to have, a very high goal that you cannot reach in the next, 5, 6, 7 years. So come up with simple steps and small gains to get to other stakeholders, so they can get to know you, recognize you as an important player, and then grow steadily. I think it's really important to stay focused, to keep your priorities, because in some situations you cannot do everything you wish to do. Every single day I do something to fundraise, because I understand that that's the only way to keep us running. And I understand that some small organizations cannot do it that way, but my advice would be, think about the fundraising being your number one priority.
We, as an advocacy group that's really pushing on policy, needed to drive a sense of urgency. And so what we learned through our focus groups, not only with patients, caregivers, and family members, but with our policy stakeholders, was that without that sense of there's a consequence to this, like people are dying, there isn't a sense, okay, we got to fix it today. We got to do this together now. And so we really have tried to make sure that all our messaging captures that if we don't do it, no one else will. If we don't have a voice collectively, we won't be able to increase screening options, push for policy, provide the best treatment possible. And we've just loved seeing people gravitate to that. And our Strong Arm Selfies started with, I'm not even kidding you, I think our staff was doing it. I was like, please, everybody on staff do it so people will share their stories. But that, it sounds really silly that people are doing that, or silly or simple or all those things, but it's the thread that people are sharing their human journey with cancer, their authentic, gritty story, from chemo chairs to with their families to funerals, and they're still finding strength and they still want to share their personal experiences. I think is very powerful. I think we've learned we're not all things for all people. We can't be that. There are groups that do things very, very well, and what we really committed to is we're going to point to the groups that do things really well, and we're going to stick to sort of what we do really well. And if anything, COVID really crystallized for a lot of groups how to focus and sort of cut programs that weren't sort of the main focus or thrust of their mission.
There's so much that we need to change and move forward. It's working out which are the ones that are winnable, which are the ones that have the biggest impact, which are the ones mean the most, resonate the most with the community, and kind of going through that process to sort of figure out which are the ones we're going to focus our resources on. Because we're not a big organization, we're quite sort of tactical with it. Right, what are the key issues? Where can we really make some wins? Where can we really make a difference to the maximum number of patients? And working together with patients, we make those decisions, and then we go back out to our community and we test that. Have we got the right issues? Have we got the messaging right? Is this what you want to say? Is this how you want to say it? Urgency and tone and nuance is really important, because there can quite often be a fine line between influence and somebody kind of not listening. I'm not listening to that, you're just blah blah blah. So it's really important to do that prep work, because the campaign will have a greater chance of succeeding. The other end of that, I think, so we always start with what's important to patients and their families, but the other end of that is who are you trying to influence, and what buttons can you press? What are the levers that will really change their mind? And then focus your campaign on that. One of the things a mistake that organizations like ours can sometimes make is by loading up our patient representatives with all the facts and the statistics and the this and then that. And actually, they don't have to get that lodged in their head to make it a compelling story. When I listen to the radio and I hear people talking, it's not the facts I remember at the end of the day, it's the human story. It's what happened to that person or that group of people. And that's what I'll say to my friends when I meet them for a coffee later. Oh, I heard this really powerful story. I won't remember the facts. So, it's sometimes trying to ladle people down with those, what we call key messages that are less important than the story. And we as an organization have learned from some of our patient advocates and how they use some of the things like Instagram, how they use Facebook Live and some of those tools and others to reach their audience and to grow their audience. And it's been a real pleasure to work in partnership with them, and it's taught us a few new tricks as well. So and also looking at what's resonating with our community, it's very much those personal stories. I mean, most health conditions you will find that the importance of story sharing, but I think particularly with bowel cancer that's the case. I'd say to anybody who's thinking, I'd like to be an advocate, I'd like to be an ally, I don't know where to start, it's all a bit scary. Don't be scared of it. It's just persuading people who can make good decisions to do that. And, and we all do that in our everyday life. Every single day, we persuade people to make the right decisions, or the decisions that we know are going to move our cause forward. It's about getting that voice together. And I don't know about everyone's country where they're coming from today, but certainly our politicians and our legislators are really influenced by the people that vote for them. And so if this is something that matters to their constituents, the people that live locally, then it will matter to them. So it's about getting people together and just starting that grassroots conversation and seeing where it takes you. Don't be scared, just jump in.
One of the most important lessons that I've learned from now more than 10 years campaigning is that you have to campaign. And not only during the International Colon Cancer Awareness Month, but you have to campaign every day. Colon cancer is attacking every day. So we have to counter-attack every day. We do this on social media. We use the social media. For me, it's not a duty, but it's an opportunity to use social media. It's free. You are responsible for the content yourself. And we have a Facebook page where we now, for more than 10 years, are posting every day. And one of the quotes that I've heard several times is that the best campaign is the one that is done and not the one that is discussed for many years and in the end is not done. We are campaigning the whole year round to actions that we are doing. Sometimes we also post other things than colon cancer, since people should know that there is a life next to colon cancer. Mm-hmm. So when something important happens with the national soccer team, then we are very smart and very first to post it. And you see a lot of reactions also to that. So, but 95% of the content is related to the problem of colon cancer. And a lot of imaging, I think it's quite important to use images. I'm someone who's thinking in images. One of the other things that we keep always do 2 lines in mind. I think that's very, very specific, and everything what we are doing on social media, we try to keep this between 2 lines. What if the thing that we are posting is seen or is read or is heard by someone who is in full treatment? And what happens when what we are posting is seen, is read, and listened by someone who lost his father or mother a few weeks ago of colon cancer? These 2 things, these 2 lines, we try always to stay within. These 2 lines we keep into our mind.
Thank you again to the leaders of these powerful organizations. To view the full sessions from the 3rd Annual Congress event, visit gccacongress.org.